They cry peace, peace when there is no peace. I'm Pastor Tom Arthur from Sycamore Creek Church in Lansing, Michigan. And if you are watching right now, give us a shout out. Let us know that you are here. Share this video on your page. Come on, do it right now. You can do it. Super simple. Just hit that share button and share it out. We'd also love to just know you're here. So give us a comment. Cindy, glad you're here. Thanks for joining us tonight. Yeah. Feel free to drop some questions in there. Is Cindy from your church, Kurt?
I don't think so. I'm not seeing it, but could be.
Okay. Cindy Gaston, boy. All right. We're glad she's here. We also want you, while you're watching, to like Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation, that page. That'll keep you up to date about the movement of building anti-racist churches here in Lansing. I'm here, as always, with my co-hosts. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
Pastor Kurt, Crossroads Church of Lansing on the edge of Old Town.
Pastor Coy Boyer, Kingdom Life Church, right here in Lansing, Michigan.
Cindy is saying she is from Kingdom Life.
She is from Kingdom Life. She's been visiting us and watching us on Facebook. And so, yes. Hello, Cindy. Thanks for joining us.
There we go.
All right, Cindy.
Graham, we're glad you're here. Cindy and Kelsey, be sure to share it out. And anybody else who's watching, we see you there. Let us know you're here. Hey guys, I am super excited tonight. We have got a guest with us, Jonathan Tremaine, the president of Civil Righteousness, which is the national organizers for Pray-On MLK. But before we get to Jonathan, I feel like we can't ignore what's happening in Michigan right now in this episode. I mean, there's been an election, right? I mean, I think there was an election.
There was an election, all right. It just
was somebody voted in as president-elect, I think.
Yeah.
And a vice president-elect, first Black, female, Indian woman as president-elect for president. But man, race, it just keeps coming up. It's like an election season right now, right? So I'm curious, as you guys, what have you noticed about race and this whole election season that we're in?
Man, a lot. You want to go first, Pastor Coy?
Hey, a lot. You know, I did hear somebody make a quote. I was watching Fox News. I've recently started watching it more and more just to kind of hear just another vantage point and try to understand. And one of the comments that was made by a guy in Detroit who I guess he's a reporter and he also helped to count. He talked about how many people are talking about how President Trump had doubled the Black vote and he had increased the Hispanic vote for himself. And he said with all of that, people keep bringing that up like, you know, hey, look at what President Trump was able to accomplish. And so the reporter was like, reporter/counter at one of the voting sites was like, yeah, he might have done all of that, but he still lost. So the question then becomes, if he did all of that with regards to a minority or people of color vote, how did he lose? He said, well, he lost a lot of white men who were educated and middle class. He said, so the real question they should be asking themselves is if he did all of this in the minority group as far as getting more votes, then how in the world did he lose? He lost because he lost another avenue or group of people that he normally had. And that was an interesting take for me.
Mm-hmm. I've been paying attention to what's going on in Detroit, which feels like a tinderbox for racism explosion. You got two white Republican county canvassers who are potentially stopping a majority Black city's votes from being counted in the election.
Right.
Like, who paid attention to that even committee before this year?
Right.
Who paid attention to that?
So what's crazy is 4 years ago when Trump was elected, the difference was 10,000 votes. Now the difference is 150,000 votes in Michigan. And much of the same board of canvassers are the same people. So for whatever reason, 4 years ago, hey, 10,000 votes, you know, they did some process through the courts, but everyone has totally accepted the results of 10,000. Now it's 150,000. And They're fighting over it. And it's the same board of canvassers for the most part. So I'm confused to what the issue is.
Man,
I'm
I
still
just,
confused by a bunch of this stuff, guys. I'm still like, I had to stop watching the news. I mean, I watched it for a good week and a half, but I haven't watched anything about the election in like the last 5 or 6 days.
I've been trying to like broaden my news out so I get like a little bit from the right and a little bit from the left. So I listen to NPR, they're kind of center left, and I've been listening and reading the Wall Street Journal, which is center right. Tell you what, the Wall Street Journal is still like, the center right. They're like, we got to accept this at this point. There's no foul play, but I'm pretty even keel, kind of mild tempered emotionally, generally speaking. But this whole thing in Detroit is really pissing me off. Like, it's just inconceivable to me what white people are thinking about potentially like throwing out an entire city's votes. That's just,
Yeah,
there's got to be some better way here. I don't know what, I'm not totally clear. That's why we're not in the hot seat tonight. We brought a guest on for him to tell us how it's all supposed to work, right?
Yes, we're taking a break tonight. We're talking about the bad emails and all the hate messages. No, I'm joking. I haven't got any of that. I'm joking.
Coy, several months ago, you hosted an event, Pray on MLK. Just tell us a little bit about that event.
Well, let me be honest at the outset that it was actually Pastor Jesse Steele over at Spirit of Christ here in Lansing who brought it to my attention. And he reached out to me, obviously, because Kingdom Life is a church that's kind of multicultural. I know it is multicultural with regards to black and white. And we're actually located on MLK Street. And so if I remember correctly, it was like the 50-year anniversary of the first street being named after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Chicago. And it was this big, what they called a pray test, where we actually gathered together for an hour and we prayed and we covered our mouths with a piece of tape and we prayed one word, whether it's righteousness, holiness, love, peace, justice. And we lined up and down MLK. All of us prayed for an hour. And then in the second hour, because we were there for 2, we actually kind of had like a small little worship thing where we had a couple people speak for a few minutes. We sung some songs, thanked everybody for coming out. And it was just trying to promote this sense of not only unity on this day, but also honoring Dr. King, his life and his legacy. It was an awesome event. So I know I mentioned Pastor Jesse Steele. Let me say his name again, Pastor Jesse Steele. He's probably watching this, so give him a shout out because he's actually trying to get me to do another event with regards to MLK Day. And I said, man, I don't know if I want to do this one because it's in January and it's gonna be cold outside. So, all right, I'm done.
We're working on, we did last year that staged reading of Letter from Birmingham Jail. And we're trying to figure out how to do that again this year virtually.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was awesome.
So I didn't actually get to go to this event because at the time I had a fever and I was getting tested for COVID. I was really bummed because I wanted to be a part of it. What I really liked about it though is that it was both prayer and protest at the same time.
Yeah.
And it had a feel to it that spoke, I think, both to God and to our community. And it felt a little more like doing something than sometimes prayer feels like. I'm not saying prayer doesn't do something, but sometimes it feels like we can just say, well, we need to pray about racism and not do something, which that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So I think, well, we've been doing these episodes where we've been talking about how faith and politics fit together, and all the 3 of us have really kind of come to a conclusion that we're not really sure ourselves all the time. It's kind of hard to figure out how does the church fit with government and policy and so on, and building and responding to racism, building an anti-racist movement and responding to racism. What exactly should that role be between church and politics? And on one side, I think you've got like the Anabaptists So for example, the Mennonites, or maybe even more so, you've got like the Amish, who are further in that direction, like just total disengagement. What are you talking about, this whole government thing? We're just going to build the church, and that's our answer. So if we're going to do anti-racism work, it's not going to have anything to do with government. It's going to be all church. Now, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but that's kind of that general direction. Then on the other side, you've got kind of, I don't know, it might be like the tradition of Martin Luther King Jr. or Protestant liberalism, which is like, they're actually in a lot of churches like my own denomination, United Methodists, there's a committee in the church that is built on kind of putting forward like policy advocacy. So it's all feed in on the whole, let's do this through government. So after spending like 4 episodes trying to figure all this out, talking about everything controversial from abortion to human sexuality, we decided it was time to put somebody else in the hot seat. So we've invited Jonathan Tremaine Thomas on the show today to tell us how it is. Now he can do that because he is the president of Civil Righteousness, the national organizers of Pray on MLK. Jonathan is also a 5th generation preacher's kid.
All right.
Well,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Sorry, guys.
That gives me hope for my preacher's kids that are my own kids. He's an urban missionary. He's a graduate of Fuller Theological Seminary. He is an actor and a voiceover talent, which makes me think he should be the one reading this script right now with like fancy sound effects going. He's an evangelist, a prayer mobilizer, and I had to like cut it down, the bio on his page. He's also a peacemaker, where he lives right now in Ferguson, Missouri. So guys,
Missouri, they would say.
oh, did I?
Missouri? That's
Missouri.
what y'all say there?
No, that's what the local Missourians say, but I'm from North Carolina, so it's still Missouri to me.
Okay, all right.
Sounds like that's the samey state instead of the show.
Right.
So guys, in 3 easy steps, Jonathan is going to answer all our questions about faith and politics. You ready, Jonathan? 1, 2, 3, go. All right. In all seriousness, tell us first a little bit about Civil Righteousness. I mean, this is a really interesting organization you built. Tell us about its mission, its vision. Why
Absolutely.
Pray on MLK.
Sure. Well, Civil Righteousness, we're a 501c3 charitable organization or nonprofit, but really we're a movement, and our mission is to pursue racial reconciliation. Or no, let me revise that, to pursue reconciliation, not just racial reconciliation, but reconciliation and restorative justice through spiritual, cultural, and economic renewal. And ultimately, it sounds like
spoken word stuff that I do, somebody would say rewind, because we needed to hear that again.
You need to hear that again?
Give it to us again. Rewind.
Yeah. Reconciliation and restorative justice, or biblical justice, which is restorative in it by its very essence, through spiritual, cultural, and economic renewal. And so
I love that.
Ultimately, our vision is the reconciliation of all things, which sounds, how's that even possible? Well, the amazing thing is that, we have this impossible gospel and this impossible task that Jesus inaugurated and initiated in bringing the reconciliation of all persons, places, and things to himself through himself, So yeah, that's our vision. That's what we're going after.
I love like how big that vision is.
Amen.
I mean, that's a beautiful vision.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely a God vision, and that's really what has compelled me personally in my life, and then also we're seeing the wisdom of what God's called us to has kind of manifest more than ever in this recent well, through the events of 2020. Even though civil righteousness kind of sprang up in my heart initially around about 2015. Yeah, we're excited to be partnering with God in what He's doing right now.
So on your website, you say iniquity demands a civil rights movement, or inequity demands a civil rights movement. Iniquity requires a civil righteousness movement. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, there's a difference between, when we look at Isaiah 53, it talks about Jesus being bruised for our transgressions, or bruised for our iniquities and wounded for our transgressions. And so we see this distinction in the Bible between iniquity and transgression. And so, iniquity is like the secret. It's the heart motivations. It's the way of thinking, maybe even pathologies. Some in certain arenas, when discussing justice issues, would talk about implicit biases and pathologies of oppression. So iniquity is the internal condition of our hearts, whereas the transgression is the external action or the external expression of iniquity. And so oftentimes when we talk about rights, we're talking about the way we live. We're talking about the externals that we can touch and see and feel. And so when we see transgression, or, whether it's policies that violate the image of God within a person or a place or a people group, we're quick to reach for and talk about a justice movement, civil rights, transforming how we live together and extending dignity in the areas where we see transgression, maybe in the public arena. But when we look at Jesus's justice agenda and what he emphasizes, which is why the Pharisees hated him, is he emphasizes not just the externals, but he brought all of the righteousness or the pseudo-righteousness of the Pharisees to the theater of the interior, the heart. In Matthew 23, he calls them vipers and hypocrites, and he basically says you've cleaned the outside, but you've not cleaned the inside of the cup. So simply put, we believe that Jesus's justice begins with internal transformation and leads to external reformation. And that's where we go. Inequity deals with the externals and demands civil rights, but iniquity or sin at the heart level and at the hidden level demands righteousness. And so, that scripture that says that the sin is a reproach to any people, but it's righteousness that exalts a nation. We want to emphasize righteousness as powerfully and in tandem with emphasizing the pursuit of justice.
Am I hearing you say that those are kind of parallel movements, or does the civil righteousness movement come first, followed by the civil rights movement, or are they somehow more like tied together, the external and the internal?
I think they are parallel. It's kind of like having a quarter. There's two sides. You get the head and you get whatever's on the other side of it. You can't have the full currency and the full exchange of the precepts of righteousness and justice that govern a community, a people group, a system. You can't get it without getting both of them. And I think what's become clear in our day is that we have some sort of ethic for social justice. I mean, even that word can be contentious because there's so many different definitions depending on who you are, but the reality is there's something of a whether it's in secular culture or in the church culture, there's something of an ethic or a value or an understanding of justice and what justice could look like in the social arena. But there's very little. It's almost like I've always said, justice has become the buzzword, but righteousness is the byword. And those who have used the word righteousness, or at least presented themselves as harbingers of some sort of moral righteousness, have often done so at the expense of carrying it and marrying it with what a justice ethic looks like. And so I think that has contributed to not only some major division, but also some major apathy in some senses, some major misunderstandings. There's a lot that I could say there, but that's, to your point, I would say that we have to carry them both. But I do see biblically an emphasis on the seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. So what does the seeking of righteousness look like is something I think that no other entity can define, but the body of Christ, the followers of Jesus, we have to go there.
Isn't it? I'm really stretching back to my seminary. I spent 3 years hitting my head against a brick wall learning Hebrew. And in the 11 years since, I've forgotten most of it. But confessions of a true pastor. Isn't the Hebrew word like it's? I think it's Zedekah or
Tzedek, yes.
Tzedek can it both be translated righteousness and justice?
It literally, in essence, yes, but literally, Tzedek means to make straight, and so justice is the act of righteousness, right? I mean, justice is to make what is crooked straight, to make what is wrong right. So yeah, they are very much aligned. And again, I think it's the same coin with two sides.
Yeah.
You can't get one without the other. And I think the greater reality is righteousness according to the person of righteousness. So when you look at the name of Jesus, actually Jehovah Sidkenu, or Tzedek, the Lord our righteous, the Lord our righteousness. So it's like, man, righteousness is actually who he is, and it's what he does. And so there's a way that he goes about accomplishing righteousness, not only in us, but in the earth.
So how does an event like Pray on MLK fit into what you've just described?
Well, the thing with Pray on MLK, which, we did in August, Pray on MLK was part of the answer, even in my own heart, when I was going, God, what do we do? Living in Ferguson, and over the last 6 years I've engaged, I've been on the ground in a lot of the major cities where there have been police actions that have led to deaths and led to civil unrest since 2014. So, I've been in these cities, and I've been in a lot of different environments where there's been activism on the streets. And one of the things that I found, even 5 years ago, I have a 9-year-old daughter. But 5 years ago, I realized that there were things happening at some of the public demonstrations, the spirit of the demonstrations, the language of the demonstrations. I'm going, I can't bring my 5-year-old daughter to this. Even if I carry a certain level of empathy in my heart and passion in my heart to want to raise my voice in the streets, I'm going, this is not the spirit of this is not in alignment with with what I feel is honoring God, And so I said, Lord, what do we do? And what became so clear to me, beyond the political discussion, beyond the nuances of whether or not Officer Wilson was guilty or whether or not Mike Brown had his hands up, those types of things that were discussion here in Ferguson. What was clear to me as I was going, okay, what I know is that prayer changes things. Prayer is not a passive action. My enslaved foremothers and forefathers knew that when they prayed, things happened. Like God responded to us. I'm the fruit of 400 years of generational prayer. And so I'm going, prayer has been the very foundation and bedrock of even the historic civil rights movement. And I wasn't seeing that sound or that ethic on the streets of America. I'm going, where's the church? And so we got this idea that there's altars of pain in every city. Charlottesville, the Confederate monuments, an altar of pain. Ferguson, where Mike Brown was killed, an altar of pain. George Floyd Memorial, an altar of pain. If we were to look at cities, there's dividing lines in every city in America, whether it's a socioeconomic dividing line or a sociocultural dividing line, where this street is a spot that has historic weight in a city or a region as a dividing line. So we call those altars of pain, and this idea of turning every altar of pain in every city into an altar of the presence of God through a multi-ethnic demonstration of humility. Sometimes we have so much to say and we can yell it and scream it, but sometimes we just need to get silent and in our brokenness call upon a help that we can't receive from any other place. And so we thought prayer has the power to unite across theological lines, across denominational lines, across cultural lines. So what if we used prayer as a form of protest? And so my wife actually thought, you know what? There's an altar of pain in every city. There's pretty much an MLK Boulevard in almost every city, is what she thought. We looked it up and found that indeed there were 900 plus MLKs in North America alone, and thousands actually across the world. Even other nations have named these cities. And so we did pray on MLK, and we had 300 plus cities that all prayed at the same time on the same day. It was profound, but it was just a first step. We're doing it again, actually, in January. We are going to go for round 2 to turn MLK Day into a day of prayer. But you Michiganders are exempt from because
it's cold up here, man.
It'll be like negative 58 degrees.
It's cold and it's COVID, so we can't be inside,
Can't be inside, can't be outside. So, yeah, for me, Pray on MLK was just an opportunity. I felt like the temperature of culture has been so long since America has seen a movement or mass movement in the streets that's rooted in a biblical hope that I'm not even sure if even the church of today believes it's possible. So for me, I'm going, this is a first step for us to create a bridge and create an opportunity for people who might use the excuse, basically to eliminate excuses, right? And to create another opportunity for engagement from the body of Christ.
Hey, Jonathan, I got a question for you. It sounds like a big focus that you are having right now, even with the Pray on MLK Day and even a second round of it, is trying to make it intentional focus to bring prayer back into whatever movement we either are going to be on board with, or trying to even bring the church aspect back into the movement, where we are reminded of one of the things that we are commanded to do, but also being reminded of one of the things that has often worked, not only in biblical times, but even for us as Black Americans here and within America, as many times the only tool we really had was prayer, as we waited and watched God to kind of move.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's an altar. It's a remembrance. It is real. You know, it's active, and it also helps change the sound. You know, one of the current justice movements, um, honestly, are not rooted in hope. You know, there's a sense of a pain fueled movement. You know, let's
Good.
lament, let's mourn. And I confess, we have had an underdeveloped theology of lament in the church in general.
Yes.
But,
Good. That's
you
right.
know, but at the end of the day, we cannot just stay there. Like, we
That's
have to
right.
acknowledge and we have to learn how to enter into lament. But at what point do we begin to change the sound? And my deal is, we can't expect secular culture to change the sound when the ministry of reconciling what has been wrong has been given to the church. So I'm going, how do we change the sound? Well, we have to create the space and create the place for the sound to begin to change. And so we're going, what does a hope-filled demonstration, an appeal to heaven, and then, you know, to take it a step further and go, okay, now let's worship out of our pain, which is what we always did. You can't watch footage from the historic marches that Dr. King led, or anyone else, and not hear the sound, we shall overcome. I mean, they sing unto the Lord a new song. So we try to create the space for that to happen. And then, you know, our goal this year, not to over talk here, but our goal is to then move beyond the moment into movement and get the church to create tables. You know, let's build the table of brotherhood. Let's create the space to have the tough conversations, which is why I'm so grateful to be a part of this podcast, because that's exactly what you've done, is created a table. But I think, you know, we need truth and reconciliation at a level we've never known. And that's one of the places we need to see these catalytic moments move us into.
So we've got a couple of folks who posted some questions in the comment section. I just want to remind you, you can do that. We're going to get to those in a little bit. But we've gotten the hard questions out of the way, so let's get to the easy one now. Jonathan, how should the follower of Jesus, or the followers in the church, the community of followers, engage politics and government while building an anti-racist movement, or maybe you might say a movement of reconciliation of all things? Do we just do that inside the church, or do we also reach out into the levers of politics and government systems and policies to make that happen?
Well, I appreciate the question. You know, I'm going to answer it in a couple of ways. The first way is, I think we have to first engage in honesty. And when I say honesty, if we're honest, whether it's the white conservative streams, the black Protestant streams, we have made idols out of physical governments. There has been idolatry and even a sense of self-righteousness based on our political positions. I mean, if we're really honest, everybody's suffering from the same disease, and that is a sense of self-righteousness. We're righteous in our own eyes. We're righteous in our own positions. And the Bible clearly talks about, you know, judge not lest you be judged. But when you do judge, use righteous judgment, take the speck out of your own eye, remove the log out of your own before you try to get the speck out of your brother's. And what, to me, this election season has revealed is such a sense of self-righteousness from everybody across the board, that we've been wielding these weapons of accusation, kind of from a place of superior understanding, whether you're more woke or less woke than the other, or whatever it may be. I think God has an issue with us. And this election year has revealed all of our issues. And in exposing one another, we're being exposed in how we expose them. So God, in a moment of bringing a nation into divine exposure, he exposes everybody. And I think what's been exposed to us clearly is that we have had political messiahs and political hopes that I think have grieved the heart of God.
That's
And,
good.
what has shown me is that, from my position has been, we have to get back into the position of understanding that Isaiah 9, the prophet Isaiah said, "For to us a child is born, a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders."
His shoulders.
It's upon him. And it says, "And of the increase of his government, and of peace, there will be no end." Now, I think, this idea of understanding what peace is not passivity. And the peace that I read about biblically is actually a crushing type of peace. The paradox of this gospel in the paradox of the kingdom is it says the God of peace will soon crush Satan. So it's like, peace, it's a violent peace. It's a shalom. It's a peace that is confrontational, because it wages war on the things that wage war on the heart of God.
That's right.
In his heart for people, But I look at this and I go, okay, of the increase of his government. So what does it look like for us to really, really believe and live as though we are like Abraham? We're sojourners in the earth. We're passing through. We are stewards in this hour. But at the end of the day, my world will not fall if Biden is president. My world will not fall if Trump is president. In fact, my role is then in Matthew, I believe in Matthew, I can't remember, but in Matthew, and in Mark 13, I know it says, "I send you out as sheep among wolves." And then he said, I'm going to bring you before the kings and governors. In one translation, it says to bear witness against them. What does that mean? To bear witness against kings and kingdoms and governors? That means my role is I'm not just trying to cozy up to the senator in my region or the congressman and get on their good side. At the end of the day, my life is to bear witness to the fact that there is a kingdom above their kingdom.
Yes.
And my role as a minister is to declare and even warn them, look, all power belongs to God, and the only power you have came from him, and you're being judged in how you are wielding and utilizing your power. So you should make sure that you are utilizing your power in a way that is actually pleasing to God by honoring people, by making just laws, by patrolling, having good policies and training for your officers. I need to remind the chief of police that. I need to remind the congressmen, the senators. I need to remind the president and the cabinet and everyone in these positions of power, because at the end of the day, that kingdom is above these kingdoms, which is why you can't go to DC and not see scripture all over the buildings and everything that it was found. And so I think for the believer, I know I'm saying a lot, but I think for the believer, we have to do whatever it takes to ascend and transcend the cultural narratives that want to just get us to deeply embed with the allegiances and the alignments of our culture. That being said, we cannot be removed from the process especially if you work as a lawyer, if you work as a policymaker, if God is giving you a sphere of influence in the realm of government, we must engage that realm to see it become more righteous and become more like the righteousness of Christ and honor God in the way that we steward those professions in those arenas.
I think I hear you, trying to describe or put equal emphasis really on both sides of that answer.
Yeah.
Perhaps what'd you say? The tzedakah, making straight internally of righteousness, the tzedakah, making straight externally of justice.
Yeah. If you look at Jeremiah 23, in Jeremiah 23, that's one of the first places, the first mentions of Sedek, Jehovah Sedek, the Lord our righteousness. And then what's interesting, it says he will be called the Lord our righteousness. But then in Jeremiah 33, it talks about Jerusalem and says she will be called the Lord our righteousness. It's the exact same passage of scripture, the exact same prophecy. I will raise up to David a righteous branch and and he'll be called the Lord our righteousness. Then in 33, I'll raise up to David a righteous branch and she will be called the Lord our righteousness. I'm going, now, did the author get it confused? Did God suddenly change genders? Like, what's happening here? No, it actually talks about Jerusalem becoming the Lord our righteousness. So it's wild because it's like, oh, he is righteous. Then he chooses Zion and he makes Zion righteous. And so I go, if we look at us, if we look at the New Testament reality is that the Lord has now become our righteousness. You and I, all of us, the only righteousness we have is because he is our righteousness. And we've been redeemed through him. But now he has chosen to make his dwelling place us. He makes us righteous, and then we make the places where we live righteous.
That's right. So
it's like, if we are righteous, then the communities that we live in, the things that we touch, the places we walk, the spheres that we navigate, they should be becoming more like his kingdom, which is founded in Psalm 89. It says in righteousness and justice. That is the foundation of his throne. You can't get it. You can't get it any other way. And that's, this Isaiah 9 passage says, of the increase of his government and of peace, there'll be no end on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time and forevermore. So this is to me the very DNA of the believer. This is the DNA of the follower of Jesus. We become righteous and we make righteous.
So, Jonathan, would you agree or disagree that in essence we pretty much need Christians on both sides or on all sides? Because if we have been made righteous through Christ, therefore we go out and we now demonstrate that righteousness to others. It would almost be a faux pas, or it would almost be going against the entire design if all Christians were just on one side, as opposed to intermingling on both political parties and on all sides of the spectrum.
Absolutely. It's Colossians 1 that Christ may have the preeminence in all things, not some things, not some parties, not some issues. It's in all things, and I think the challenge is that we cannot trust ourselves. I mean, the challenge is that we can easily move into idolatry, in those positions of power. We can make our own, the things that burden us. Me as a black man, there's certain things that really stir my black man heart, so to speak. But I have to be willing and able to take those things and not fully trust the political processes that are only going to serve me, that are only going to serve, because my allegiance is to a higher kingdom, and that kingdom involves people beyond that aren't necessarily black, So you know what I'm saying? So we have to be willing, and anytime we develop a theology or a cultural engagement ethic that mainly reflects our cultural preference or cultural tradition, whether you're white or black or Asian or whatever, or your cultural special interests, you have to be willing to allow yourself to be examined.
So wait, you saying my socioeconomical preferences, I got to put that on the shelf?
You might have to, brother. Yeah.
Kurt and Coy, I feel like the intellectual tenor of this Perspectives podcast has just gone up several notches. 35 minutes.
Yes.
Jonathan, what you're describing, I'm going to push back a little bit, and I feel like I'm going to sound like a flaming liberal. And in my circles, United Methodism, I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm not on the liberal scale side of things. I tend to be kind of on the right, but in this company, I sometimes sound more progressive liberal. But
Yep, that would be true.
Can I get an amen? So what you've described about the church's role sounds really beautiful. But then I look at the church and I see, especially, I've just been deeply dismayed. And I'm consider myself evangelical. I'm on the left edge of it, but I so when I use the word evangelical, I don't use it in a derogatory way. But I feel very deeply dismayed by the white evangelical church's seemingly broad support, sweeping support of President Trump, who seems to me to say and support some of the most racist things that we've seen in any presidential, not just president, but presidential candidate in my lifetime, or at least in my voting lifetime that I've been paying attention to. And I don't know what to do with a church that doesn't seem to me to be living up to anything close to what you've just described, of speaking that kind of the righteousness of Christ into the halls of power, particularly around this issue of race.
Yeah. So are you wondering what I think about that?
Yes, please. Help me understand how that fits into. I mean, I really like what you've described is beautiful to me. And then just help us understand, or help me understand, what do we do in the church just fails it so miserably, and it can fail it on the left in other ways. But with this, particularly with this issue of race, I mean, that's where that's the sort of ground I'm standing on, and how I'm seeing it or looking at it.
Well, a mentor of mine in life has always said, he said, you cannot bind what binds you. In other words, you only have authority to speak into or to speak about what you have wept over, and to the level at which you've been freed, you can bring freedom. And, I think what we see, there's the reality is, it's kind of like if we were to go to the conversation, if we were to talk to a 16-year-old who is experimenting with drugs, you can warn that 16-year-old till you're blue in the face all day, every day. You can make them sit down and watch videos and learn and see all the statistics and get all the warnings about how dangerous it is to experiment with those drugs. But at the end of the day, the only thing that's going to keep that 16-year-old from engaging with drugs is God. I mean, like at the end, you know what I'm saying? Like at the end of the day, the only change, the only thing that will restrict or restrain that teenager from going to that party or engaging in this or engaging in that is got to be some sort of conviction that comes outside and apart from themselves and apart from your coercion. And what I'm realizing is, in all the rhetoric, in all of the conversation, again, I think Donald Trump simply, the dude, he didn't become a billionaire because he was an idiot. He became a billionaire because he knows exactly what to say to close a deal. He knows exactly what to do to rally the people that he needed to rally to get the support that he needed to get. And at the end of the day, and I'm probably saying too much. I probably already said too much, but at the end of the day, I think that what he was able to articulate appeals or represented to, it gave language to so much of what was already in people's hearts. That's what gave him the amount of influence and power that he's had. And the inability to see the blind spot or blind spots and insensitivity when it comes. I personally, I'm saying something that I have never publicly said.
Publicly said, huh?
Yeah.
We do that a lot in this.
Right. I don't know so much that Donald Trump is a racist. I think he's a classist.
Yeah.
I think that he was able to articulate thoughts and patterns and ideas that galvanized racist and galvanized racist elements of our society. But all that to say, let me take it where it needs to go here. The church, what this has exposed is that many in the white evangelical church lack a biblical revelation of their own condition when it comes to God's heart on the racial issue. So this is what I'm saying. To elevate it beyond Trump is that God used Trump and what he represents to expose a heart condition in the white evangelical church.
That's good. That's good.
On some of these class and race issues that God himself was making an issue of, but yet because you're bound by it, you can't see what you're bound by. So
let's make sure we're not just singling out the white evangelicals for that sort of exposure, because I think it's exposing it in white Protestant liberals as well.
Yeah. Well, and I would go a step further and say, back to what I said at the very beginning, is that when God, this is again, if we think it's man's ability to bring this level of exposure, we've instantly lessened or cheapened the reality of the sovereignty of God. When God, I believe God has brought this nation and the nations into a divine confrontation. And when God brings nations into moments of corrective discipline, some people have called 2020 the year of racial not reconciliation, but reckoning, that we're in a racial reckoning. If God brings a nation into a moment, he brings you into the room to get spanked. Trust me, everybody getting spanked. Like, it's like, it's not just one group or one little people. He exposes everyone. And I think, again, we're all getting exposed. But I believe this is when I look at Isaiah 42, the passage that describes the justice of Jesus and describes Jesus as justice, it says that in verse 3 of Isaiah 42, it says, a bruised reed he will not break, and a smoking flax he will not quench, or a dimly burning candle, he's not going to snuff it out. And this is in context of the way Jesus brings justice. And what I think is that God looks at white Christianity or Western Christianity. He looks at the failures of maybe the white evangelical community or the white liberals or whatever. And it says a dimly burning wick. Even if your light is burning that dim on issues of justice and equity and understanding of God's heart for it, he's not going to put your little candle out. And I think what happens is we've gotten so frustrated or we can get so frustrated we can weaponize our frustrations. And the weaponization of the frustration doesn't put gasoline on the flame and make you want to be more engaged in the racial equity conversation. If anything, it's offending more people and hardening their hearts and closing their ears from even wanting to learn or be engaged. And the other thing is, it says, a bruised reed he will not break. And I think this is the admonition to those whose response would be like, well, we've already elected a black president. Well, we've already had a civil rights movement. Why don't the black people just stop complaining and pick themselves up? No, 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 no. He says, you are a bruised reed. These people are wounded and bruised, and I'm not going to break you and try to get you just to get over yourself, you know? And so the gospel is just so filled with wisdom, I think, for how we're to navigate through this.
Man, I gotta tell you, that whole you cannot bind what you are bound by or what's binding you, that is huge. I will be using that, and I'm not going to even say you said it. I'm just going to act like I came up with it through a revelation from the Lord. I just want you to know. Because I'm serious, man. Listen, if I'm struggling with pornography, it's hard for me to speak against it directly or to really see the evils that it really brings about. But that's the same thing as a black man. If I'm so focused on race and so focused on the issues that affect me, then it is very challenging for me now to talk about race in a way that is probably healthy and even more balanced, because I'm bound by this issue myself. And so it doesn't matter what the issue is or what the thing is. If you are bound by it, it's very challenging and very difficult for you to see it for what it really is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
hey, I'm looking at the time, and I want to make sure we get in this one question that Kelsey Brand asked on Facebook, because it's a good question, and I think it kind of ties in together some of what we've been talking about, but then puts it at a really practical level. She mentions that a lot of her friends who are white allies are experiencing a kind of burnout right now, a compassion and activism burnout, and she's kind of wrestling with rest and care for yourself in the midst of fighting for the oppressed, wondering how you take care of yourself when you're in these circles, and how you can learn and how can we learn from how you choose to rest yourself. So Jonathan, as you're engaging all of this, talk to us about patterns of rest or Sabbath or renewal for yourself.
Yeah, I think, you know, this burnout is a real issue across the board, especially young activists that I'm connected to. And we've seen this pattern before. After the Ferguson movement, many activists actually dealt with depression and anxiety, suicidal tendencies like never before. And I think this is the key in a culture, particularly in a social media driven culture that demands a response to every single news incident. You know, there's a certain pressure that if I don't post within 2 minutes of a video coming out or another police action shooting or another this, if I don't say anything, you know, the whole adage, silence is violence. And so there's this pressure to immediately engage, immediately say something. And I think it's actually damaging because what happens is we find ourselves reacting. And there's only so much space you can have to stay sane if you're in constant reaction mode. And the way this summer went, it was amped up. Ahmaud Arbery, Floyd, boom, Breonna Taylor, boom. I mean, and so there's all these shocking reactions, and it just drains you. So we have to move from reacting to a righteous response. And a response can be offensive, not just showing up and jumping on the next bandwagon. So for me, I developed a rhythm, especially as a movement leader. People look and they expect me to have something to say about just about everything. I've learned, you know, I don't have to have something to say, or if I do, I can take my time.
Yeah, that's good.
Give yourself 48 hours. Don't just, you know, if you hear the next thing, the next fight, the next battlefront, let's give it 36, 48 hours, go through the emotions, and then submit your emotions to God. This is what I found. I've had activist friends who go, well, I have righteous indignation. I'm organizing this out of righteous indignation. I go, okay, well, what are the fruits of righteousness? Love, joy, peace, patience, gentleness, kindness, self-control, forbearance, long suffering. So I'm going, if you're showing up at all these cities and organizing all these different things and fighting for this, and you're online and you're back and forth and you're confronting white fragility and apathy and all these different things, but it's not producing love, joy, gentleness, kindness, patience, peace, long suffering. Like, are you more joyful now that you've been in this work? Are you personally feeling like you're becoming more patient with people? Is your confrontation producing that in the other person?
Right.
Not, and you're finding yourself more anxious, losing sleep, more depressed, then the chances are you're not really in a healthy place. You need to pull back and resubmit your emotions and your plans to God and say, God, lead me, help me, and lead me in peace. And so I've had to develop those rhythms of being willing to pull back and to make sure that I'm in right alignment with God, that I'm moving from a place of rest and a place of peace.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. I think sometimes people don't realize that movements like this, change doesn't happen overnight. And so you gotta get your mind geared for a long haul. This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And then I think the second thing is, because we don't recognize that it's not a marathon, change doesn't happen overnight, that it's okay to patiently wait on the Lord to do it in his timing. Because sometimes, sometimes liberation or God's vindication or God setting things straight, it may take 400 years. I mean, Israel, they're down in Egypt for 400 years. That's a long time to be praying, Lord, deliver us, deliver us, deliver us. But when he shows up, it is also due to the fact that they were patient in prayer, waiting, expecting, and still living and working even as slaves with that hope that he's gonna save us, he's gonna restore us.
Absolutely.
Hey, Jonathan, if people want to keep up with you or learn more about you, where can they go to look that up?
Absolutely. You can follow us on the gram or on Facebook. You can like our page at Civil Righteousness. We're also on Instagram at Civil Righteousness. We're relaunching Pray on MLK. We're calling the body of Christ. We're calling people all over the country to really harness the day of January 18th as a day of prayer. Host a discussion and have some conversations like this on Zoom, with your own community, your own context.
Is that your plug to say we can have it in Michigan because we ain't got to be outside?
Yes, sir. Yeah. You can do it online.
Pray on MLK virtually.
That's it. Yeah. So
we'll pray on Google Maps on MLK.
That's right. PrayOnMLK.org to sign up to be a part of that. So,
well, hey, friends, if you're still watching, be sure to give Jonathan some love in the comments. And before y'all who are still watching, leave. I know, probably Jonathan, you're like, you just heard this white northerner say y'all. I did do seminary in North Carolina for 4 years, and I picked up the word without actually being able to pronounce it.
What seminary?
I went to Duke.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm a Blue Devil.
Okay. I grew up in North Carolina, so
Yeah.
Oh man.
You want to say y'all, all y'all for us, the way it's really supposed to be said?
Well, it's y'all. It just okay, y'all.
So before all the things that Jonathan just said leave, be sure to like our core Facebook page. Keep up to date with the growing movement of anti-racist churches in the Lansing region. And hey guys, this is our lucky 13th episode of
Wow.
Episodes.
All right.
So you can find the first 12 as well as short takes on our core Facebook page. I've also been starting to put these as just audio only. I feel like this is probably content that people might engage a little more fully as audio through my church's website and so on.
Mhm.
We don't really know what's next for perspectives. I mean, maybe we'll go to those polls as far as the answer to this question. Somebody who's like, no, we need to ignore politics and go all in on the church, or maybe we'll go, all in on Protestant liberalism. But whatever we do, if you join the core page on Facebook, you will be in the know. So until then, friends, be well and do good.